This land is mine, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
Good evening. My guest today with me is George Thabault, who is the assistant to the mayor, and actually George has joined me on several programs previously. We're recording this on February 3rd, a Wednesday afternoon, and it'll be shown first on Tuesday evening. What I want to concentrate on today is the number of ballot items that the people of Burlington will be voting on March meeting day, which is March 1st. In my view, the items that we have on the ballot constitute one of the most exciting ballots that I have ever seen. A lot of really important issues facing the people of our city that will determine the future of our city, and the people of Burlington will have a chance to vote them up or down. Some of them are money issues, some of them are not, some of them are non-binding issues, which essentially are just advisory opinion questions that the City Council will hear. Let me start off with the first item on the ballot, item number 1, which is probably the most controversial of all of the ballot items. And that is a charter change. And by a charter change, we mean an attempt to change the charter of the City of Burlington, which then has to be approved by the Vermont State Legislature, a process which I am not terribly enthusiastic about, to tell you the truth, and that we deal with in another item on the ballot, but that's what a charter change is. And that first charter change deals with the establishment of a child care development fund here in the city. And let me spend a few minutes talking about why I very strongly support this charter change. The fact of the matter is that throughout our country and throughout the state of Vermont and in the city of Burlington, the child care situation is in a crisis situation. It is in crisis situation, and I use that word advisedly, for a number of reasons. Number one, the cost of child care for working people is very, very high. The average cost is what, George?
About $72 a week in the Burlington area.
Okay, it's about $72 a week. Some of the centers are more expensive, some other facilities are less expensive. If you understand that we have many people in our community who are making $15,000 a year income, $20,000 a year, and you're talking about 70 or 80 or in some instances $90 a week for one child in child care, you're understanding that a very significant part of the income of working people is going toward child care. And it's really reaching absurd proportions. And what it means is that people are spending a lot of money. Other people are saying, it's crazy. If I'm going to go and work and bring home $200 or $300 a week, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be spending 1/3 of my take-home pay for child care. So you're having a number of people who are not going into the workforce. They're not improving their lives. Often women who are single head of household leaders who are not going into the workforce, are not advancing themselves, are not becoming as productive a citizen as they would like to be because of the high cost of child care. The reason that child care in this nation is in crisis, in my view, is precisely because the federal government is not doing anywhere near what it should be doing, especially under President Reagan. The president always seems to have money available to fight wars in Nicaragua or else do many other things with a $300 billion military budget, but there's not enough money available for child care. Interestingly enough, I think in Canada now, which is a country with 10% of our population, the conservative government of Canada is talking about a $5 billion more money.
They're going to be phasing in that much more money into the daycare program.
$5 billion new dollars for child care in Canada, a country with 10% of our population, and we're doing extremely poorly in terms of our federal government. There is a bill in Washington called the ABC Child Care Bill, which we're strongly supporting. What is it, for $2.5 billion?
Yeah, it would bring about $4 million into the state of Vermont.
Right, which would certainly be a major step forward. Whether it will get past the Congress and the President remains to be seen. In Montpelier, there is going to be an effort. I believe the governor's budget includes more money for child care. My understanding is that it includes about $550,000 new dollars for child care in the state of Vermont. That's a step forward, but it is nowhere near enough money to deal with the problem. So the problem manifests itself in, number one, that the cost of child care for people all over this state, and in our city is too high. Number two, despite the fact that it's high, the child care centers themselves, and the child care facilities are not surviving. They're barely hanging in. The average salary of a child care worker is what now?
We estimate it's around $4.50 an hour.
Okay. So here we are entrusting workers, teachers, with dealing with the emotional needs, with the intellectual development of little children, and we're paying them $4.50 an hour. And as a result of that, the turnover rates in child care facilities is very, very high. What is the turnover rate, George?
Well, the last survey that was undertaken around here showed that about 56% of the staff leaves every year. So you really have a complete staff turnover in roughly 2 years.
Okay. And that's really horrendous in terms of maintaining the stability and the quality of care in a center. I mean, if you're looking at public education, if you're talking about your kid going to a public school and half the teachers were leaving every year, people would say this is not a good school. And children, of course, become attached to their child care teachers, and it's not a good situation. And as the economy in our area continues to prosper, what's happening is that many people who love kids, who want to work with kids, they're looking around and saying, why am I working for $10,000 a year when I can do something else and make $15,000 or $20,000 a year? And yet you're having many wonderful people who are really sacrificing their own financial interest by continuing to work in childcare, but there is a limit. And I think if we want to have quality childcare, you don't want to have that turnover. You want to stabilize the situation. There's no question but that we need to pump more money into childcare, raise the salaries of the teachers. I was talking a couple of weeks ago to a woman who has a master's degree, who was the director of one of the best child care facilities in our area. She was making $14,000. Master's degree, many years of work. And that's just crazy. So the answer is that after whatever anyone may say, nobody denies that we need to pump significant amounts of money into child care if we want to have quality child care. If we make that decision, and if we decide that we want to do that, the next question is, well, how do you get the money? How do you do it? You can't get the money from tuition anymore because people are paying as much as they can pay. It seems to me that if the federal government is not going to be doing what it should be doing, if the state government is not moving as fast as it should be moving, you have to look to those people in our community who are employing other people to help pick up some of the financial burden regarding child care. It seems to me appropriate that the employers, those people for whom workers are working and who need child care, should be asked to contribute to the Child Care Development Fund. We have, within this charter change, developed several mechanisms by which this funding could be done. Essentially what we are talking about is the establishment of the Child Care Development Fund through a special child care assessment district which would impact on all employers in the community. That is industrial property, commercial property, tax-exempt property who employ people. And our hope is to be able to raise through that mechanism up to $600,000. None of that money would come from homeowners. I believe that it would be absolutely inappropriate to ask working people or elderly people whose property is not employing anybody else to contribute to that fund. So for the homeowner, this will require no property tax increase whatsoever. For those people who are employing people, commercial, industrial, tax-exempt property, it will amount to a very small increase. There are several mechanisms that we're looking at. One would be about a 2.5% increase in property taxes to cover that. The other one would be a special assessment on the number of employees that an employer had. But if we went the first route and increased property taxes, you'd be talking about a 2.5% increase, which is a very, very small increase. And this year, we are coming forward with no general property tax increase whatsoever. So in fact, it's a good year. The schools are not coming forward with a property tax increase, so it would really amount to a relatively small property tax increase for those people who were asked to contribute into the fund. The total amount that the City Council could appropriate would be up to $600,000. Approximately half of it would come from commercial and industrial property, business property. The other half would come from the employees in the public sector, if you like, the tax-exempt sector, including the City of Burlington. The city, between the schools, the electric department, and so forth, would contribute about $100,000. UVM and the medical center would contribute almost all of the rest, and some of the other tax exempts would make minimum contribution.
I think it's important, Bernie, to point out that the actual specifics of the plan would be worked out after the legislature gives its blessing to the enabling legislation. Basically, after the legislature says to the city, you have the power, we give you the power and the authority to develop this ordinance, and then locally, with people, the Board of Aldermen and people in the business would develop the way to exactly get the money to the child care centers and the parents.
That's a very important point to make and to reiterate, because I think there's been a lot of confusion about that. One of the criticisms that you perhaps have heard about this, and that you certainly will hear in the remaining month before the election, is how is this $600,000 going to be spent? What is the plan? Who is eligible? How much goes to here and how much goes to there? And therefore, that our critics are saying, the business community especially is saying, why should we support this program when you don't have the specifics? And the answer is a very simple answer. What we are asking for is a charter change which will enable us, for the first time, give us enabling legislation to establish a child care development fund based on an ordinance passed by the Board of Aldermen. The point that George was making, which is perhaps the most important point of this whole discussion, is what we are doing now by passing this charter change is starting the discussion as to how we should improve child care in Burlington. This is not the end of the discussion, this is the beginning of the discussion. What this will allow the Board of Aldermen to do, if they so choose, is to raise money to put it into child care. And in that process, what they will have to do is have tremendous amounts of community input. We'll have to hear from parents, child care providers, the general citizenry, as to how we can use money to improve child care in Burlington. So when people tell you we don't have all of the details, of course we don't. We're not supposed to at this point. All we want is the enabling legislation to begin the process. Furthermore, if we did have a program, we said, well, we want to do a voucher system, well, we want to put money into this or that child care facility, and you had that passed, and you got that approved by Montpelier, that meant every time you wanted to change a $5 appropriation, you would have to go down to Montpelier to get the charter change passed. And you can't do that. That's an absurd way to run a program. What you're asking for is enabling authority to develop a program by ordinance from the Burlington Board of Aldermen. When this is passed, it doesn't mean that 1 cent is appropriated. The discussion is just beginning. It may turn out that this charter change is passed, and 6 months from now the Burlington Board of Aldermen will say, well, thank you, we have the authority, we choose not to exercise it. We choose not to spend 1 penny on child care, or we choose to spend $200,000. They will have the ability to spend up to $600,000 raised from a special assessment fee on employers. Now, the other argument that we've heard, and some of the Democrats and Republicans have made this, they've said they're very, very concerned that it's only the business community that is contributing to this. And some of them have suggested, why don't you ask for a general property tax increase? And our view was, no, we are not going to do that for 2 very simple reasons. Number one, as I indicated earlier, it seems to be absurd to raise taxes on homeowners who are not responsible for the crisis in child care. They are not employing other people. Their property is not being used to employ other people. Second of all, if you did a general property tax increase, you would exclude 2 of the major employers in the city who are contributing to the child care problem. That's the University of Vermont and the Medical Center. And you would have the homeowners paying that money rather than UVM and the Medical Center. The theory behind this approach is you ask employers, those people who are employing people, those people whose employees need child care, to contribute to the fund for their own employees. They ask homeowners to do it, as some of the Democrats and Republicans are suggesting. Seems to me to be regressive and doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, what's going on really, after all is said and done, the conflict is going on is not only between the Democrats and Republicans and progressives, but also between the business community and the progressives. And I think the business community, frankly, is upset that they're being asked to contribute to this fund. And I don't know, what to say. We are not picking on them, but ultimately somebody is going to have to pick up the burden. I don't think it should be homeowners. I think it's appropriate that employers whose employment is in a sense the reason that the problem exists, that they pay their fair share. And I think the last point that I would like to make on this issue is that every piece of progress, every benefit that working people have made in the 20th century, whether it is the 40-hour work week, whether it is the right to organize unions, whether it is a minimum wage, whether it's Social Security, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's Medicare, whether it's the right to have work in a decent and safe environment. Every type of effort and progress that workers have made has always been fought by people who have a lot of money. And that's really what it's about. They prefer the status quo. They would rather have homeowners subsidize child care rather than themselves. And that's the reality of politics in America today. The business community, large corporations exert enormous power on the whole political process, and most of the time, political leadership caves into that pressure. And we saw something on Monday night, this is being recorded on Wednesday, which really just disappointed me very much. You saw the entire business community coming in and saying, well, we don't like this program, we don't want to pay for this program. And I usually don't get involved in partisan politics on this program here, but I have to say that without exception, on Monday night, every Democrat, every Republican said, okay, you guys in the business community don't want it, that's fine, you don't have to have it. That disappointed me very much. So we spent a bit of time, we're going to be spending more time on that. It's going to be, to me, a very, very important issue. Parents and children are entitled to quality child care. We are going to need to pump public money into it. The federal government is not doing it. The state government is not doing it enough. It has to be done at the local level. The business community, UVM, the medical center should be contributing to it. If they do, we will be able to make a significant impact on improving child care in terms of raising salaries, helping subsidize child care for working people. I think it's an important issue. George, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think maybe before we get into the other ballot items, Mayor, we could basically remind people that people who are not registered to vote or who want to change, have moved within the city, would like to change their place of voting, that the deadline for registration is Saturday, February 13th at noon, 17 days before the election. That's for people who are not registered to vote, and if to change your address to vote in another ward of the city, you can do that up to 2 days before the election. But we really urge people that have moved to kind of notify the city clerk, stop in and make that proper change so they can vote in their own ward and or register before Saturday, February 13th at noon.
And I thank you for making those comments. In this city in the last number of years, we're very proud of the fact that voter turnout has significantly increased, both in terms of mayoral elections and aldermanic elections and ballot items. And my sincerest hope is that whether you agree with me or you disagree with me, that's not important. We want to see as many people come out to vote as possible. There are aldermanic elections in all 6 wards, of course, and in addition to that, we have the 10 different items on the ballot.
So we'll also have a presidential primary on
Right.
the ballot. And
Right.
one other note, in Ward 6, the polling place has been changed this year because of the damage to Edmonds to perhaps just for one election. It will be at Patrick Gymnasium at the University of Vermont campus.
Okay, so for people in Ward 6, for the first time, in order to make it handicapped accessible, people in Ward 6, who usually voted Edmonds, I guess, will now be voting at Patrick Gym in UVM. Okay, also, if I'm not mistaken, Jim Rader, our city clerk, will probably have, I'm sure he will have the ballot items printed out for you to examine if you would like to study them and formulate your views before you walk into the polling booth. Okay, we went through item number 1, which is the Child Care Development Fund. It will allow the City Council to raise up to $6,000 from employers to fund child care in Burlington. That's item number 1. Item number 2 is again a charter change. Actually, before I go further, I should back up and tell you one more thing, which is important to know. This year, we are not asking for any property tax increase whatsoever for the general operating budget. And I'm very proud of the fact that for the last, this is a plug for us, we'll advertise it, plug for the Sanders administration. We're proud that in the last 7 years, we've only asked for 2 general property tax increases. One went to the streets some years ago, and one went to the police department last year. This year, there is a 0 property tax increase for general operating budget as a result of growth in the city, as a result of increases in the gross receipts tax, and in other areas. We just don't need more money from taxpayers, so we're in pretty good shape. What we are asking for is the approval of a number of bond issues, which, if passed, would in fact raise property taxes. Not very much, but they would. And I want to go through those. The charter change for item number 2 is a charter change for working capital and capital improvement. And this would, in fact, authorize the city on an annual basis, this is not just for 1 year, but on an annual basis, the right to raise up to $250,000 a year for capital improvements. Why is that needed? Why do I support it? As I think everybody knows, one's house, one's car, one's other capital acquisitions deteriorate a certain amount every year. I mean, the vehicles in the police department, in the fire department, in the parks department get older. They have to be, we have to buy new ones or improve them. Equipment in the library deteriorates. Our parks need constant improvement as a result of wear and tear. And what we would like to do is establish a long-term capital improvement program, which is different from the general operating budget in terms of the number of employees that we have or the salaries that we pay our employees. That's part of the general operating budget. The capital improvements are monies that would go directly to improve vehicles, parks equipment, the parks themselves, real products, real things. And what this would enable the city to do is to raise up to $250,000 every year to pump into replacing vehicles and equipment that is getting old and maintaining that equipment. And I think it's a good idea that we separate the capital improvement schedule from the general operating schedule. Item number 3 is authorization for capital improvement bond for city streets and other public improvements. That would be a $1.5 million one-time appropriation. Wouldn't be annual, it would be one time. And that would go mostly into streets, sidewalks, handicapped access improvements. There will be about $900,000 going there and $600,000 going into other specific capital areas. One-time improvement. Now the story there is we are making, as I think most viewers know, significant progress in improving our streets and our sidewalks. We estimate that we'll need about $1 million a year. What we've been spending is about $1 million a year, which is why we're making that progress. We are going to need about $1 million a year for the next number of years in order to get all of our streets and sidewalks and handicapped access in the kind of shape that we would like it to be in. The excavation fee that we passed several years ago is bringing us in less money now than we had anticipated because, in fact, many people who are digging up our streets, many of the utilities, are now beginning to understand that it costs them a lot of money when they have to pay the excavation fee. They're getting their act together a little bit better, which is good for us because it means there's less digging going on in the streets. To make a long story short, what this would enable us to do is, for a 2-year period, pump $450,000 a year out of this bond issue into the streets, added to what we already have, will keep us going at $1 million a year for the next 2 years while we figure out another and more progressive, I think, source of revenue to fund ongoing street repaving. So this would be primarily for streets, sidewalks, handicapped access, curbs, but it would also be for the library. Some of that money will be going into the library and into the parks as well. Next item is a one-time bond issue of $900,000, which would go directly into the fire department to essentially replace all of the vehicles that they have right now. We are making real progress in our fire department. Some of you may have noticed that we have new alarm boxes that are going up all over the city. I think the morale in the department is good, our leadership is good. There has been a concern over a number of years that many of our fire trucks are getting old, and that's simply true. And the result is that we're spending a lot of money maintaining them. They break down often. We have to take them over to the Department of Public Works to get maintained. And our thought is that not only would it be good in terms of improving the quality of our service to the people for fire protection, but in the long run we'd be able to save money by having new vehicles and maintaining them at a high level. So we are asking for a one-time appropriation of $900,000, which would probably replace all 6 major pieces of firefighting apparatus. That is the ladder trucks and our pumpers. And we think that that's a step forward. The commission feels very good about it. The leadership of the fire department, Chief Diane, feels very good about it. And the union feels very good about it. And we think that that will improve our public safety services in the city. The next issue is item number 5, which is a general obligation bond for energy conservation capital improvements in the schools. Now, in truth, I am not terribly knowledgeable about this. George says he knows something about it. This comes from the school board, not from the Board of Aldermen. George, do you want to briefly go through that issue?
Very briefly, it's going to convert in 11 school buildings the heating system from electric to a gas hot water system. And the current bill now for heat at these schools is $464,000 a year. After the system is put in, it'll be dropped down to $100,000 per year. So it'll have plenty of savings in there to pay off the bond, which voters are being asked to approve, plus leave a net savings of about $175,000 per year. to put toward other uses. So it's really a bond that kind of pays for itself and saves taxpayers money, which is unusual.
Okay, and so the feeling is that this is going to be paid off by the savings
Definitely.
that the...
Definitely, the consultants that have looked at it and the school board has been very conservative in their estimates so that they really are hedging their bets in favor of the taxpayers, and they're really confident that this is going to pay off and result in a very substantial net savings to the school operating budget. So it's significant in that it will save money, and it is getting a strong endorsement from the school officials.
Okay, thank you. Item number 6 is a charter change dealing with conflict of interests. And very simply, that's one that the Board of Aldermen has worked on for a long time, which tries to ensure that elected officials, when they vote, are not in a conflict of interest, that they're voting their conscience rather than their own financial interest. So it deals with that issue. Item number 7 is a charter change which would increase the compensation to members of the Board of Aldermen from $10 to $20 a meeting. Let me say a few words on that one. I think many people out there saying, well, we don't want to do that because, we want to save money. I don't know that people are fully aware of how much work members of the Board of Aldermen do, whether they're progressives or Democrats or Republicans. Some of these people work, well, George, you used to be a member of the Board of Aldermen, right? And, some of these people work 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week. They are sitting on committees. The Board of Aldermen meetings on Monday night start at 7:30, often end at midnight. All of them are on one or another committee. They have to deal with your concerns as constituents. It's not uncommon for these people to be working 20 hours a week, and they do it because they have a sense of pride and they want to do their best for the city, no matter what their political point of view might be. And this would increase, from $10 to $20. It would probably raise them from probably 40 cents an hour to maybe 80 cents an hour. And I support that. I mean, it's not going to make a great deal of difference, I think, but I think it would be an indication of support for people who essentially are volunteers, and they'd end up making $1,000 a year. So I hope people will give thought to that. And that's also true even for the Republican and Democratic aldermen. We don't care. They should get it too. They work hard as well. Item number 9 is a very important issue. It's item number 8 is a very important issue. We're running out of time. Is that correct now? So I'm going to talk fast here. That is an advisory referendum. It's non-binding. It's not a charter change. There's no money involved. It is an opinion question, and hopefully the Board of Aldermen will listen to your opinion. And that deals with just cause eviction. Very simply, right now, if you are a tenant in the city of Burlington, you're living in a rental unit, your landlord knocks on your doors and says, oh, by the way, you have to be out of your house within a month or whatever it is. What's the limit time? 2 months? 1 month?
60 days.
2 months, right? You have to be out. And the tenant says, well, why? I've been living here for 20 years. Doesn't matter. My Aunt Tilly is coming in. She wants the apartment. Okay, got to get out. A tenant has no protection today, none, zero, against arbitrary eviction. The tenant could be living. We've heard stories of elderly people who have been living in housing for years. I mean, decades after decades. The house gets sold. A new landlord comes in, cleans them out. It's wrong. A tenant should not be evicted from his or her unit just because the landlord wants to get rid of you, I think. Okay, this was very heavily debated by the Board of Aldermen. The progressives and myself tried to get this on the ballot through the Board of Aldermen. Republicans and Democrats did not want this on the ballot. It came on by petition from a tenants organization. People will vote on it, and it exists. Tenant protection like this exists in Boston, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, and in other areas. I hope people will support it. Item number 9, and we're running very quickly out of time, is an advisory, once again, non-binding referendum on growth control and management. I think all of us are concerned about the issue of growth. It's an issue that Governor Cunin and the legislature is beginning to deal with. What kind of development do we want in Burlington? Do you want local government to be vigorous in preventing development that you don't want? Do you want us to have the tools to be able to say to a developer, I'm sorry, you're not really wanted in the city of Burlington? If you want us to have those tools, we're going to have to develop legislation giving us more clout. It's really quite a controversial issue. So what the wording is basically, do the people want the city and the state to develop legislation to protect us from unwanted development? The last item is an advisory referendum, again non-binding, on prevention of sexual assault and violence. Clearly the issue of sexual assault and violence in our community, in the state, in this country, is a very important issue. Women are assaulted far more often than people, I think, are aware of. I think in our city, in terms of the work being done by our Women's Council, by the Burlington Police Department, by Women Helping Battered Women, a bunch of groups, we're making some real progress. And this vote would indicate support for the direction, I think, that we are going in, and for the need for more programs. Whoops, wait a minute.
Got a couple more.
11 and 12, my goodness. Okay, two very brief ones. Okay, advisory referendum on home rule, very important issue. Should the people of Burlington and every other community in the state of Vermont have the right to run their own lives without having to run down to Montpelier every time we pass a charter change? I think we should. I think the present system stinks. It gives the Montpelier state government far too much power over the cities and towns. That's item number 11. Item number 12, very important issue, an advisory referendum on national health care program, sponsored by the progressives. I happen to believe that given the crisis in affordable health care in the United States of America today, that the United States should join with every other country in the world, with the exception of South Africa, and establish a national health care system which would guarantee health care to all of our people as a right of citizenship. In my view, the present health care system is out of control, costs are zooming up, doctors' bills, hospitals' bills, Blue Cross Blue Shield, off the wall, no end in sight. I think you need a national health care system. This simply is an advisory opinion which would be sent to the United States Congress and President Reagan, and telling them how we as a city feel. And I'm running out of time. We'll be talking about these issues, I think, in the next couple of weeks. Once again, we hope everybody will come out and vote on March 1st. Thank you very much for your attention.
Land is yours.